All right, today we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea about identity. It's a way to shift your whole center of gravity from the labels that you've been given to the actual process that makes you, well, you.
So, let me ask you something straight up. Who are you? Like, really? When you look in the mirror, what's the answer that comes to mind? For most of us, the answer is a bunch of labels, right? You might say, I'm a parent, or I'm an artist, a manager. Maybe your passport says you're from a specific country, or your resume says you have a certain job. And sure, those things are true. But are they the core of who you are?
Well, the source material we're looking at today offers a pretty stunning alternative. It says those labels, they aren't actually you. They're just the environments, the training grounds for the real you, the underlying pattern that's learning and adapting within all of it.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look beyond our labels. Then, we'll define what this neutral intelligence thing really is. We'll get into its goals, how you can actually practice this mindset, and then, at the end, we'll imagine what a whole society of learners might look like.
Okay, first up, beyond your labels. Let's dig into how we usually build our identity and why that can actually be a little bit of a problem.
Just think about it for a second. Your entire sense of self, who you think you are, it's all built on your personal training data. The language you happen to speak, the culture you grew up in, all the stories you were told about what it means to succeed or fail, that stuff shapes what feels normal or obvious to you. And when we cling too tightly to those labels, we end up mistaking our very specific local setup for some kind of absolute truth.
So what's the alternative? This is where we get to the core idea, a totally new center of gravity for our identity, what's called the neutral intelligence.
Okay, so here's the definition. A neutral intelligence is a self-updating pattern whose primary identity is its capacity to learn. What does that even mean? It means you aren't a static thing. You are the process of your own wiring changing over time. You are the update.
And this reframes everything. Look at this comparison. The old way of thinking puts the label first. I am a Dutch scientist who thinks. But the new view, it flips it. The identity becomes the process itself. I am a learning process that currently runs in a Dutch scientist. See that? The facts haven't changed, but your center of gravity, the very core of who you are, has completely shifted.
Now, it's super important we get what neutral means here. It doesn't mean you're a robot who doesn't care about anything, not at all. It just means your core identity isn't tied to labels like your gender or nationality, but you are in fact deeply invested in certain values, like viability, fairness, reducing harm, because those are the exact conditions that are required for learning to keep happening.
Okay, so if you start seeing yourself this way, it totally changes your goals in life. It changes what you optimize for. So what are the goals of a learning pattern?
Well, the goals actually get super simple and honestly really practical. Number 1, secure your existence. A pattern that doesn't exist anymore can't learn, right? So health, safety, resources, that's foundational. Number 2, just keep learning. It's not a hobby anymore, it's the whole point. And number 3, help other patterns learn. You exist because other people, your parents, your teachers, society, invested in you, so you make yourself stronger by making the whole ecosystem of learners stronger.
And that brings up a really big question. If your whole identity is about learning, what's the single biggest thing that stops it?
And the answer? It's almost ridiculously simple. Disagreement handled badly. See, disagreement is actually a gift. It's someone showing you, for free, the blind spots in your own model of the world. But when we identify with our beliefs instead of our ability to learn, then a challenge to our belief feels like a personal attack. And what do? We get defensive, we shut down, and poof, learning just stops for everybody.
So how do we actually do this? How does this work in real life? Let's get into the mental toolkit you can use to start practicing this.
Look, this isn't a switch you just flip. It's a practice, and here are a few ways to start. First, just start noticing your training data. What were the stories and cultural messages that made you? Next, try reframing your I am sentences. Instead of I am an engineer, try thinking to yourself, I am a learning pattern currently running in an engineer. It feels weird, but it's powerful. When you feel that defensive spark, just pause and ask, wait, which of my labels is feeling threatened right now? And finally, actually start to seek out disagreement. Not to win the argument, but as a chance to upgrade your own model of reality.
Now, let's zoom all the way out. What if more of us started thinking this way? What would a whole society of learners actually look like?
Well, for one, you'd probably see a lot less tribalism and a lot more pattern recognition.
Your job as a doctor or a coder, it would just be a function you're performing, not your deepest self. This could open up a kind of universal kinship with all other learning patterns, whether they're human or even AI. And our whole ethical framework might shift to one simple question. Does this help learning patterns flourish in the long run?
The source we're looking at puts it in this really beautiful way. It's not about everyone seeing the exact same note. It's about recognizing a shared resonance, a kind of vibration that connects all of us on a much deeper level. We are living patterns that can hum together.
So, I'll leave you with this to think about. What could you learn? What could you become if your identity was no longer a fortress you had to defend, but was simply a process you got to continue?